great work, Jesse. And I just want to say I'm very honored by your dedication to me. That's incredibly kind of you. You added a couple screens here, that title screen, and then here we've got the your instrumentation and so on, two percussion playing bass drum and cymbals and so on. All right, yeah, C basso horns or two basso horns in C. Okay, so we are going to start off this longa evaluation, this very first longa level evaluation for the 2023 orchestration challenge, covering the orchestration of Beethoven's Piano Sonata number 24. And we're going to start off by talking about the new kind of level of evaluation. So I've added on a few little perks here for my longa level supporters, who really have just been a backbone. A lot of these supporters have, not constantly, but for very long stretches have supported at a high level, and it's really helped keep the channel going, and helped me to take time off from my regular career of being a pro orchestrator, and spend time with creating orchestration tips in video form, and also my score analysis series, which I'm really itching to get back to. A lot of people have been asking, where's the Carmina Burana, Thomas? And so on. So all of those videos are really made possible by my Patreon supporters, and especially my longa level supporters, who just really, and Dotted Brev, just have really been very generous, and that's pretty amazing considering that most of those folks are professional musicians and a lot of times professional composers and orchestrators. They just really, they care about what I'm doing, and they've been so generous. So you'll probably notice already that there are timestamps, I guess you could put it. There are chapter divisions in this video, so that you can jump from from section to section of the different different rehearsal marks. And also, one thing that I'm going to start off with, and I'm going to do this for all of these longa level orchestrations, is talk about the really important aspect of preparing these scores for the stands, right? Getting them ready so that they can be performed or read in a in a rehearsal, in a reading, in a concert situation, and so on. Okay, so Jesse's evaluation doesn't really need a whole lot of those, because as you can see, it's just he's really got some great chops as an orchestrator already. Of course, there are a few issues which I'm going to talk about now. So I'm going to start off each of these evaluations with a general overview and some focused points about the approach that is being taken, and then I will get down to the nitty-gritty of like the specific passages and how they're orchestrated, and and what Jesse is doing right, and how I can help him to make his orchestration better if I can, right? Okay, so let's start off. I have two separate screens here, so sorry about the clunking around. So there are a few kind of piddly little things. I see that you made a pretty good attempt to mark divisi and unison, but there are still some things towards the end. There are a few places where you forget to mark, divisi, non-divisi, unison, and so on. Right. So those things have got to be have got to be proofread, and you have and there's I don't understand this. Here you have all of these. You have all of these intervals, and then you have divisi here. If you're going to have a big leap like this, then it should all be divisi, right? Because it's just, imagine what you're asking the player to do. Position their fingers up here in these very high positions and then jump down, from non-divisi to divisi, right? So just really go through all of this, and also consider that there are going to be some places. Let me see. There was this one in particular. Yes. Here you're saying non-divisi in parentheses, right? And I am absolutely certain that your players are going to want to play these parts divisi. All right? Yeah, these sixths right in here and the two different voices, those could be played non-divisi for each divisi part, right? Same thing here with the cellos. That's all fine. I'm not sure how necessary it is, but we can talk about that when we get to the scoring. All right, so that's one thing. All right. Another issue here is that you have these really lengthy passages of secunda and prima volta. All right, and that would be, I think that's how you should rewrite this. You have this written in English. But if you really want your score to be truly universal, let's say that you decide that you want to pay to have this recorded by an Eastern European orchestra. You might want to just really normalize all of these indications here to prima volta and secunda volta, and that would be abbreviated. So prima would be 1A and secunda would be 2DA, I think. So yeah, and then the word volta. So I feel that you sort of snuck in, you know what I mean, Jesse. I said don't write out fully developed repeat sections, don't turn them into separate sections, but you snuck in all of these little second time only, first time only, and everything else, right? This one I don't understand. Second time only 2, and then second time only 1 and 2. I don't understand. That maybe meant first time, or I don't know. This is so there needs to be some proofreading in that. Okay, but anyways, I feel like it's a back end into completely writing out the repeats in both sections. And if that's the case, then you might as well just go for it and write out both repeats and develop them a little bit more, right? I mean, I think that you just might as well just take it all that much further if you are going to get this ready to be performed. All right, so now let's jump back to the beginning and talk a little bit about Beethoven's style. All right, now Jesse, you know that this is a sticking point for me, and that is frequent normalization of slurring across the pickup beat into the next bar, right? As we see here and here and here and here, right? And it's not just me who has a problem with that, it's Beethoven. Very, very seldom does Beethoven do something like this, okay? I think sometimes he'll stress, like there's some places where you stress, you push into the next beat, and that's fine. But I would say if you really want this to be more period and feel, you should correct this, okay? And just really, just allow your instruments to articulate the downbeat. There's nothing wrong with it. Do you see what I mean? That just why my gentle orchestrators, do you guys have such a problem with articulating the downbeat? Just articulate the downbeat. The players want to play, they want to start a new bow, they want to start a breath on the downbeat, okay? Not that they mind doing this, but it's just that I'm seeing it so much, and of course, Jesse, you're no big flagrant flouter of that particular rule, or it's not really a rule, but it's just an observation, really. But I'm just saying, why do I have to see it all the time everywhere now? It's one of these things like, remember a couple of years ago, people started writing A1 in all their scores. And like, I don't know where they got that idea from, but suddenly I had dozens of scores with people writing A1 when they just meant like, the first player. So please think about how does Beethoven slur his phrases, right? Study that, copy that. Okay, and if you find one or two exceptions, that's fine, but one or two exceptions does not a style make, right? So why do we want to include one or two exceptions into the main way that we interpret a work? Okay, now let's talk about unifying certain inflections. All right. So I'm seeing a lot of things like this where we have, maybe you forgot to write in a slur here, but I'm seeing places where the certain little slurs and certain little thingies aren't really unified. But I mean, even if were you to have forgotten to put a slur here, think about the fact that you have the other voice going, ta 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 ya. You know what I mean? Saying, and the other one going ta. Right? We have a difference of little inflections in the slurring, right? Which I don't think helps the unity of the voices, right? And you might be thinking, well, okay, so the voices are working against each other, right? And this helps to sort of define them. I guess. I think that's a harder point to make. But yeah. Okay, now, jumping back, this was something that sort of stuck out when I was looking at your instrument list. Okay, basso horn always has to indicate what tuning it is, right? These are natural, like if as soon as you see like C basso horn in a period kind of, or in an orchestration of something from the classical period, you think that this is going to be a period horn thing, right? So you're making an effort to have natural pitches, open pitches, right? I mean, that F is like, I think it's a half stopped, but that's a very common thing in classical scoring. But you have to tell us if this is a C basso horn or a B flat basso horn. You can't just say basso horn, right? It has to tell us. That's why my template said C basso horn, right? So there's reasons why I put things in my template. So please preserve. Like if I have something specific in there, be careful before you delete it. All right? Okay. So now this is something you actually sent me a message. I think it was a PM or an email or something like that. It was an email. That's right. So there are some things here where you throw in some pitches that are not possible on natural trumpet, right? It's like here you got these F thirds and so on, and you have you have a kind of a scale here, right? Right, that natural trumpets can't play scales in this register, right? Because they can't stop. It's not like yes, they can. They could stick their hand in the bell, but that just sounds really, really weird. Okay, but I think that there's one part that we can really point out, how you could more optimize, like using your alto and tenor drums. By the way, this has to say T trombone, right? If you have alto and bass, then you also have to abbreviate this to T trombone, right? Just to quickly refresh my memory here. Yeah, so you do write tenor trombone. Oops. Okay. That cracked me up. Okay, so look. Here you have all these pitches that could be natural for your C trumpets, right? So like here you have these written Cs, right, which could be played by your trumpets. And then you have like E flat and F and so on, which could be played by your trombones, right? So you have a bunch of situations where the trombones could be handling the weird pitches, and the the trumpets could just be playing, octave C's and, maybe B flat and so on, right? F sharp. So yeah, so just needs a little bit more. You need a little bit more work if you really want this to be period instruments. Or you could just chuck all that away and score for chromatic horns and chromatic trumpets and not worry about it so much, right? And then maybe you don't even need your trombones. Or maybe you just need a bass trombone and a couple of tenors, right? Instead of an alto. Okay. Now, let's talk about a few other things here. Okay. So, this kind of scoring should be in two separate voices for clarity. Okay? So, yeah, just like the writing 1 and 2 over the different things. So, just like the first, so stems up for the firsts and a rest in the second voice, and then vice versa, stems down and the second voice and a rest over the top for the first, and so on. That's just like your conductor will be happier with that. And then when you get to places like, let's see, where was it? Yeah, here, it's okay to write double dots. That was a classical period convention. So I would just say make this a double dotted half note, right? And that gives you the little eighth rest at the end. So I think that that's perfectly fine. Now at here at 27, this would have to be played as a lip trill in your C basso horn, right? And it's not going to be as beautiful as you think it might be, right? It's totally possible, but it's you got to think like the C basso horn is it's got a big chunk of pipe, right? It's a longer length of pipe than a modern F horn, right? That makes it a little less, a little less comfortable of a thing to play, and so then you're asking the first player to go boy with their lip, right? Of course, you got the violas here to cover it, right? So you're thinking, oh, we'll just push forwards here as the violas have this nice strong trill. Okay, but it's not so simple. So it would just be much easier on a modern double horn. Now at 34, you throw in these little incomplete ties. Okay, now that's a modern convention. If you're scoring for period instruments, and I think even if you're scoring for modern instruments in a modern idiom with a modern, like in a, just like orchestrating something modern or composing something modern, just use the resonance of the hall, right? Or score a half note. Okay, there's just no need to do this incomplete tie thing. Like I would really reserve this for times that you just really want the timpanist to not stop the head at all, right? And oh darn, sorry, I just noticed something kept running on my other screen. Okay. Yeah, so just either write a half note here or just write a quarter note and let the hall be the sustain, right? Now, let's jump to rehearsal D here. Okay, so do you intend this to be portato? Like you have these slurs in these other parts. So you could get a nice unified, slightly pulsing sound here in the upper part, the upper divisi second violins, and it would feel like a slur, right? And then likewise, jumping ahead here to bar 58, we have the same thing happening here in second trumpet, right? Now, going a little further to bar 100, I guess a lot further, back to this part here. You have a slur over 3 repeated notes, and there might be some other areas in this where you have something similar. Like you have a set of intervals, and one of them is just a repeated note, but you want the voice that moves to be slurred, and you want the voice that doesn't to be part of the slur, right? But like this ends up with a kind of a semi-portato, right? Which, I mean, I really don't like. I think it's very, it feels like an artifact of the slur that was intended for this written, or it's in C, for this F, B flat F thing. So maybe if this were separated into 2 voices, and then, the bottom one was portato and the upper one was slurred, right? But would that mean that these should be also portato, right? And then, of course, like this A and B flat down here, that's not possible on a natural trumpet. Anyway, so there's some things to think about. There's another thing you could do too here is you could slur from the E to the B flat and back, and then you could slur from the F down to the E and back, right? You could just like interlock the parts, right? And then you could get a beautiful even slur. But it would sound exactly the same thing if you just had the lower voice portato and the top one slurred. You get exactly the same effect, and less fuss. So those were that was my introductory suggestions for you to bring this score, to make it more ready to be sent to the stands. Okay? So now, let's get into the actual evaluation of the orchestration. Starting with this opening scoring here, I don't really see the need for the divisi double basses here with the octaves, with the octave in the cello here. I think you're better off just divisi cellos here. I think that is a firm enough note, especially at pianissimo to piano, right? And then just have your double basses down here on this low F. In fact, like you might actually think about whether or not you really want that deep of a that deep of a pedal tone right in there with the way that you've scored your strings. But I mean, the way that you have scored your strings is actually really beautiful. Don't get me wrong. All I'm doing is just saying, consider this, consider that, and so on. So I really love the way that you have very nicely divided up the bowing here for your string players. I think it's all very effective. Here, if you break if you break the slur, then you end up with the with a down bow here at the end for all of these middle string parts, right? And then that's easier to die off on than an up bow. However, having thought about all that, I think it's a beautifully placid, very Beethoven-like opening. It's like the statement of the first subject in the Sixth Symphony, right? Just a little bit of clarinet accompanying that, right? So, but it mainly strings. So I think that it's very, very much in the line of Beethoven, and to the extent that you emulate Beethoven, which I feel that you do a little, but you also like it's almost like a fantasia on your own particular style, your own outlook, right? So I feel you set the mood effectively, okay? And I like the crescendo here. You might not need the crescendo in these root Fs, right? And just put the crescendo up here into the upper voice of your Divisi cellos. All right, so now let's talk about the melody starting with elegance, right? So we've got some clarinet, first clarinet. I think you could easily just slur over the entire thing. I don't think you need to you could just go ta ta, right? And then here just make this one big slur, or make it a slur from here to here. As opposed to ta ta ta. Yeah, it's like once again, like this, you could have easily just gone ta 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 ta, and I think that would feel like more. And the same thing here. I mean, why should we, ta ta, guising where the emphases are, and so it's okay to emphasize or to just not even emphasize, but just to state or articulate the downbeat. And if everybody's playing in a legato style, it doesn't really matter so much, right? But it does matter to the musicians in being able to pick up their bow. So, I mean, I have some criteria here. Melody starting with elegance, natural flow, natural transition to octaves, expanding without clogging up. I feel that you tick all those boxes very nicely. Yeah, I mean, I don't think you need to do all of this dynamic mixing, though, right? What if everything was just piano and you just scored to the piano dynamic? Yeah, that's also not in the character for Beethoven's period, right? So, if you want to take a more modern approach, then that's fine. But then you don't need your C basso horn, right? And you might not even need the alto, tenor, bass trombones, right? So, you could just do like a quartet of horns and a couple of trumpets, right? And maybe a bass trombone if you really need a big fat bottom voice, right? But you've already got contrabassoon. Yeah. I mean, I can see the the textural scoring here, and it's quite lovely. So don't get me wrong. Yeah. So, I mean, I feel that it is elegant. I think that just in your own voice, it's fine the way that you've scored this, but I would try to maybe normalize things a little bit. Maybe if everybody in the wind section were just piano, right? I mean, it like you to a certain extent, you've got to trust your players to know that they're playing a featured line and that they're going to play out, right, as part of their melodic function. So I would say just really watch out for the security blanket of just marking up constantly marking up the melody instrument, because it's totally not necessary. Just go and look at your symphonic scoring, Beethoven's symphonies and Mozart and Mendelssohn and so on. Like there's almost never a need to mark the featured line any louder than the rest of the ensemble. Okay. But, this textural stuff, I guess, is all right. Oops. All right. So I feel that this is fine in terms of those criteria. So let's move on to the leggermente. All right. So why no leggermente marking? All right, I think Beethoven put it in there for a reason. He wants the he wants the player to have a certain poise, right? He wants them to get into a mindset where they are agile and limber, right? And on top of things in a slightly virtuosic way, right? It's just they just toss this off like ha ha, you know. And yeah. So, is there a contrast with the theme? Yes, because you're going from you're trading off between clarinet and first violin, right? And then you have contrast between melodic instruments, right? Bassoon, and then the your flutes, second time only first. All right, this is 1 second time only, 2 second time only. Wouldn't that be in the first time only? So you have clarinets the first time, and flutes and octaves the second time. All right, okay. Now this is going to be less. This is going to be less effective than you think. All right, in terms of the contrabassoon's agility in this tenor register, it is going to disappoint you 2 times out of 5. All right, I wouldn't risk it. Okay, but that you do all of this only needing the barest of harmonic support here, just a teeny bit of emphasis at the beginning of each of these things. I almost feel like it wouldn't hurt you at all to also underline the following note in pizzicato. Okay, now, this is so great. This is an extremely stripped down interpretation. It's like a note for note transcription of the piano score, right? And you have just enough of everything, right? You have the little teeny bit of harmonic density setting up the next part. You have the crescendo. You tell us how loud you're getting. This should be marked mezzo forte. You tell us how loud you're getting. You do have the emphasis of color just in the strings, and then you do piano subito at the end, right? It's absolutely, everything's great, but this should be marked mezzo forte, right? Everything should match in terms of the strength here, the dynamic weight. And here, this could also be scored portato as well, just like two tenuto articulations in a slur, and then I think you get a real unification here. I don't think there's any need to do this down up, right? If you want to emphasize this, then all of the instrument should emphasize it. I think you're fine just going da, right? And this is very, very clever. This doodle-leap, 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 doodle-leap. Very, very nice. So you do, you contrast in texture and dynamics in terms of just like adding this little icing on top, right? Da, doodle-leap, doodle-leap, bum. And then hand off to the next section. So I feel that this is beautifully effective, this opening section here, this little A section. Now let's look at B. All right. So I feel that you are trusting your contrabassoonist's virtuosity a bit. This is going to be sort of Beauty and the Beast like. Do you know what I mean? It's going to be very raw. It's going to sort of sound a bit like a bassoonist with a sore throat, right? Which is kind of like the way I think of contrabassoon tenor register. So for the right contrabassoonist, it would be a hell of a thing. And if it were played by a contraforte, it would amaze you, right? Because here's the thing about contraforte: a lot of orchestrators, very experienced people, who have worked with contraforte, including some extremely experienced orchestrators and conductors that who have commented in the group, their experience is that the bassoonist, the third bassoonist, will bring the contraforte to a session, and then they'll just start playing all of their contrabassoon parts really loud, right? Here's the thing, is that what's amazing about the contraforte is that it can also play very subtly, right? It can just really just diminish down to almost nothing and have all of this nuance in its, between soft and mezzo dynamics, and then between mezzo and forte dynamics, right? It can just really navigate in that area, whereas the contrabassoon has much more limited range of nuance. So, and also in terms of technical prowess, the contraforte just basically has that covered hands down. The last time I heard a contraforte used, I've heard it used about 4 times, 5 times now, just with where the contrabassoonist showed up and they had a contraforte. Okay, and I was listening to the player warm up, and actually this was their last concert, their very last concert. They were retiring from the symphony orchestra, and they brought the contraforte, and they started, like, they were warming up between, like before the rehearsal, and they were playing cello suites on it, Bach cello suites on it, and with a beautiful fluidity and nuance, and it was amazing. So to get back to what you wrote here, I would say that played on a contraforte, that would work beautifully. Okay, under your oboe part here. Played on your standard contrabassoon that is taken out of storage and reluctantly played by the third player who'd rather be the first player, not so great. Okay, especially in a semi-pro, university orchestra kind of setting. Now, in a top orchestra setting or a regional orchestra setting, all right, it'll be okay, but it won't be as beautiful as you imagine. So I would actually score this as a bassoon part. That's making a short story long. Okay, and then here we got these little this horn right in here. So if we just go back to our criteria, fresh new color, yes, right. We have like oboe taking this, and then complementary color, complementary timbre, horns and oboes work together so beautifully. And then here adding the color of clarinet to it, that clarinets plus horns, wonderful sound. Yeah. And then here we're getting into the it's kind of strange that you sort of drop off, like you have the clarinets here. Did you forget to have them continue on here? I have a sneaky suspicion that you were going to continue on with the clarinets doubling the horns, and you forgot. So maybe put that back in, because it's a really nice way of keeping the color going, right, as it moves into the middle strings. So here we have thinking ahead to widening the gap, right? Emphasis on the alternating middle note. You're just putting the emphasis on whatever notes you feel like. That's fine. Okay, but you have to think about the pianist, right? Playing these chords, these alternating chords. The middle finger is going to have the most weight on it. When you've got a chord where the outside is black keys and the inside is a white key, right? And then the chord that follows, so we're talking about, in the key of F sharp major, right? Okay, and then the chord that follows is not accented. So I think what Beethoven was trying to say was that G double sharp in the middle was intended to be the accented note, right? Because the outside pitches are exactly the same, right? So it's just that written here as A flat and then G. Right? So you could have gotten away with just accenting the A flat. This is interesting. The bassoon, doubling the, and then the contrabassoon and so on. Trombones, alternating with double basses. Yeah, so yeah, this is very, very cool what you're doing here in your middle winds. And then this just this long held note. It's your flute scoring is pretty good, I've got to say. Ba da 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 da. Hey, what if you just took away the slurs? Da 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 da. Do you know what I mean? Yeah, and this. Okay, what are you asking the string player to do here? Right, their bow is skirting over the strings like this, and then they have to reach up and notch to get this B natural. Just let the slur end here, and then go staccato here. And if you want to do this fancy button, dun dun dun, then you can do it afterwards, right? Okay. Yeah, but all this is pretty acceptable. I like the slow build, right? And then pushing here with the strings and the flute and clarinet. I think that works pretty well. By the time you get to here, the second flute is pretty much minimal in terms of its impact, right? Forte against the forte, against your forte clarinets, the trill in the horn, right? This tremolo here. What's the second clarinet? What's the second flute doing here? It sure isn't doing anything that you can hear. Yeah, maybe all you need is just first flute or just a duet flutes up there, right? Maybe if you really want to thicken this pitch a little bit, you could, have oboe play it. But I don't even think you need to do that. Yeah, okay. And then look what you're asking the string player to do here is to play these divisi pitches and then just suddenly throw this out here to play this sort of like an octave chord with a E in it, with a E in the middle, and then this open E above. And this is not the easiest thing in the world to play. I would not. Why don't you just score this as two interlocking sixths, right? And don't worry about the roll. Or just like grace notes, right? Yeah, that's very problematic. Okay, so I feel that this is pretty effective if you're trying to not get too big. But if you really wanted to emulate the big fortissimo push, you could have scored it bigger, right? Without hurting anything. Okay, so going on to section C. So do we have a new quality of tone here? It's kind of interesting. You have your flutes, duet flutes and clarinet working together, and like a single flute. Here's where I would say you could do some dynamic mixing. I would take the flutes, the duet flutes, up to mezzo piano, okay, and then they have a chance of blending with a solo clarinet. Yeah, and then this lovely little bassoon here, yeah, and the pizzicato strings. That's a really lovely idea. Yeah, and this once again, it's going to be a little sore throatish, without any kind of doubling from the strings or anything. Yeah, you really are taking a lot for granted with the fluidity and coherency of contrabassoon, as you really are using it in a lot of very exposed ways. So, I think you're taking some chances there. But it's a contraforte, and the player knows how to play it. They haven't gotten dazzled by its ability to play loud, and they aren't overdoing it all the time, and they really have an affinity for the instrument, like that player who sadly retired. Then I say, yeah, go for it. But like on a standard contrabassoon played by a player who is not that great at it, or who just plays it every once in a while, and the instrument is not in the best condition, you're taking some chances here. Okay, I'm just warning you. Yeah, and look at the slurring grouping. How beautiful the bassoon is going ta ta ta. Well, what's this? Ta ta ta. You know what I mean? Come on. Just go ta 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 ta. All right. If your strings are slurring by the beam group, then I think your winds could be slurring by two beam groups, right? Rather than this really irregular kind of pattern, you know. I think you can do better than that, Jesse. Okay. So, and it's really, once again, just completely not in Beethoven's style or voice at all. All right. Now, this I felt was very strong here. Ba-da-da. Of course, that's not really a C trumpet thing. That could have been done in alto trombone very easily. Very high note for the instrument, but still doable. Yeah, I mean, just maybe you just need, maybe all you need here is just a quartet of standard double horns, you know. Yeah, and I really love the trade off over from strings to to bassoons and brass. I thought this was just very, very powerful. And then this having the strings react and then take over with a little bit of brass in the middle. Da boom boom. I don't even think you need bass drum in here. I think timpani is strong enough. Right, and then and look, with this kind of dovetailing, you don't need your seconds to come in until here. Okay? Yeah, it's better to have them come in right on the beat rather than rest da da da. Rest da da da. How many rest da da das can you have them do? Right? If you, instead of having the go rest da da da, have them just go one da 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 da. Just beautiful, regular, beautiful on the beat dovetailing. That's the way to do it. And the same thing here, da 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 ba da 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 da. Just have the violas come in right here. Okay. All right. I don't even think you need this. Like second time only, it did not convince me in the in the mock-up, and it doesn't convince me looking at it using my inner ear. I don't think you need all of this extra stuff. It's sort of like scrubbing, right? It's like you hear a lot of elbows when you have these octaves. These octave runs. It's just, yeah. I think you can get away with just a single cello line here. Some of these things, very, very long passages might be interesting or it might be useful for the players to see the détaché mark. So that just means they're going to be using the middle of the bow kind of bouncing back and forth. And that gives it a beautiful, it's just a, I'm trying to put the right way. It is not mechanical, but it is, it's energetic, right? It's energetic in an applied way, right? I'm trying not to say mechanical. It's not mechanical at all. Yeah, and then just all of this brass stuff. And here, I just like, the more I look at this, the more I think that just you just need a quartet of horns of modern horns, and you're fine. Because like you're using so many different conventions and so many different nuances and so many different parts of your own modern outlook in this. I don't think you really need to I don't think you need to abide by any kind of, older principles of period scoring to make this feel period. Yeah, okay. So, all right, so that's great. And then just like the, kind of same idea going forwards. Da 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 da. Yeah. Bum 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 da 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 dum bum bum. Yeah, you know what? I thought that I haven't gone back and looked at my template, but I was pretty sure that I had the little flat sign over the trill and it seems like it got left out with a lot of orchestrators. So we ended up having like a not really a trill, but a like more of a shake between D flat and E natural, right? So like a minor, the an augmented second, right? Kind of like the equivalent of a minor third. Yeah. So, but maybe I forgot to put it in. I'm pretty sure that I did. And once again, normalizing the like this is great. Like look at the slurring that you've got here. You don't even need this slur here, right? You know what I mean? Just it's fine. Da da da. What if it went da 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 da? But this could all be ta. The thing that I think you should watch out for, Jesse, is like when the slur starts when we're jumping down in bowing, and it goes ta. You may be adding a nuance here that you don't intend. Ta 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 ta. So it's almost like you're putting in a little hairpin here, a pair of hairpins, but without even realizing it because of the jumping down and then digging in on the lower strings. Whereas if you slur down to the F and then slur back up to the F, then it evens out the color of this main melody, right? And the same thing is I would say would be true of the flutes. The flutes are slurring. If you change the slurring to match this, or have the slur go across all four notes, then what you end up here is the upper register just naturally slurring down into the middle register, right? And then it kind of all the color all working together. And then here, of course, this is, yeah. I think you'd be better off here. I think you'd be better off here just a duet flutes rather than adding the piccolo. But I mean, like the piccolo does have a really nice sort of folky color. So I mean, it's not like it doesn't add. There is no difference at all. But if you're just thinking in terms of strength, right? Then second flute is better. But if you're sort of trying to tweak the color a little bit, then piccolo is good. But the flute will absorb almost all of it, right? And all of its eccentricities. Yeah, and then clarinets doubling the first violins is very wise, right? And then this is all really great. And here the da 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 da, yeah, that all works for me. And that just brings us to our evaluation criteria. Is this more intimate? I feel it's not. It's more colorful, right? Like there's, and more emotional, right? The way that you've scored it, and you've changed the accompaniment pattern, right? I question. It's just a question mark in my criteria. Reminiscent of opening or altered to fit the melody. And here I think that it's more like you alter it to fit the drama, right? Which I think is works pretty well. If you're going to push here with your lower strings, I think you should push with your lower winds. Okay. Right, and then here you've got this that's very, very cool. Yeah, there's no reason why you couldn't throw in this low F sharp in your cellos as well. Yeah, and then just switching over to flute. Yeah. So first to second, I think you should have a dovetailing note right here, where the second finishes and the first flute starts. Yeah. Right, and I love this push right in here. Bassoons, I don't know if you need contrabassoon or this sort of divisi. I don't know. It's like it feels real heavy the second time. Bum, ba, bum, da, 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 da. Yeah, look at this push, right? It's just exactly like the piano versions. Most pianists choose to push into this, right? just like Spencer Myer does, right? So I feel it just really sets up these octaves here. As far as this is concerned, I almost feel like it's better to have the octaves in the first violin, and then the second violins just play the lower pitch right in here, because the first violins are going to really have a lot of projection. So putting a lot of weight in the middle, you already have extra weight here with your flutes. Yeah, and then once again, just like the bowing pattern is just so much easier if you divide this bar in the middle. Ta ta ta, or just get rid of all of the slurs. Ta 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 ta. That's even more Beethoven like, right? And this is very cool right in here. This could use a little support from the strings, don't you think? And then boom, you can end with the accents. Da 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 da. Yeah, and that's very, very cool. Yeah, you know what? I sort of feel like that there are moments of support that you could be giving to your symphonic thing if you just had like natural, or excuse me, just had like modern horns, right? You could be adding more, like, if you're constantly thinking, well, I can't do this because I have to use the open pitches here, and I can't do that because I have to use the open pitches there. I think you're just holding yourself back as an orchestrator, right? Like you're using a kind of a neo-romantic kind of approach here, right? So you just use the modern horns, I think. Yeah, so you have all this pushing, ta 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 ta, right? Like, what would Beethoven be doing though, right? Da 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 da, right? So, I'm not saying it's wrong. It's just, right. And then here, I'm not sure. Like, you're starting slurred and then you end up not slurred. Are you sure you want to end the slurs so quickly? Maybe you want to go to maybe you want to keep slurring and then go to like maybe go to separated notes right here and even just write in détaché just to make sure. But other than that, it's nicely done. Yeah, and then we have this da 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 dum ba da da dum. This is impossible on natural trumpet. Ba da da dum da 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 dum. Yeah, and then the second violin's coming in under with the clarinets. I almost feel like you could be adding some support here from flute as well. If the clarinets are going to be here, I think the flute's going to be coming in there. Yeah, and here you jump up, and then the flutes could dovetail into where you jump up. Yeah. Yeah, and this could be stronger too. There are a couple of places where there are big fortissimo movements, and you really kind of underscore them a bit. And I'm not saying that's right or wrong, but there are moments where you could really be exploring your own ability to write a big tutti. Bum bum bum, like right in here, for instance. Couldn't this be more of a brassy moment as well? Da 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 da. This is nice. Yeah, yeah. Okay. So that takes us to E. All right, building on open material but also returning. Now I sort of I didn't jump forward once we got to D and then compare the different sections of A, B, and C against E. So let's do that now. All right, we're going to jump back to A. All right, and just look at the way that this was scored, the little subtle push here of color and the little triplets here, and the statement and the clarinet with a very bouncy, jolly second bassoon and so on. All right? And then, just remember there's this all these things right in here, and then simple strings with a little toodleep, toodleep. All right, so that was our A section. Now, let's jump forward and see how this was reinterpreted by Jesse. Okay, and you can see that there are a lot of features from the D part, right? There's like the ta 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 happening there, right? And then some similar things happening here in some of these parts. This is kind of cool. This kind of running timpani right in here, and the tremolo is very, very fun. Okay, and then once again, it's just like as I mentioned before, this is kind of rather impossible for trumpet. But I mean, look, if you want to really stick to what is possible for the trumpets, like some of these things, some of this could be played on alto trombone, and some parts could be played on trumpets. But once again, I think you should just go for modern instruments. Ta 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 ta. Now this is fine with me, piano here, but what isn't fine is mezzo piano, pianissimo, piano, whatever. Okay, so look, just find a place where everything works together at the same dynamic, and then just make the slightest amounts of adjustments. So what I would recommend here is just keep everything piano, right? The piano is a big universe. Please trust me. Please trust me, everybody. You do not constantly have to mark up your melodies to the mezzo area when you have a piano dynamic in a texture. Why? Because mezzo is gray. Mezzo forte is a grayish forte. Mezzo piano is a grayish piano. Piano is a world. It's a universe of different nuances and possibilities and colors. And it's where those instruments sound the best when they're in restraint. Okay? So mark your melody instruments in piano unless there just really is no other way of getting around it. Okay? Now, if this is piano, then you could have your trumpets pianissimo. Right? And then you could have them push forwards to mezzo piano here, where this goes up to a mezzo forte. So I think that would be the adjustment. If you really want this to be backgroundy, then fine. This could be pianissimo as well, but it'll just get completely swallowed up by your trumpets. Nobody's going to hear it, and you can't hear it on the Mockup either. So yeah, so you might as well just leave it at piano, right? I mean, otherwise it's not there. Okay. So other than me crabbing about that and, hopefully not hurting Jesse's feelings, I think otherwise it was very beautifully scored. I feel that's a really cool reinterpretation. I really love, Jesse, that you're not just completely copy pasting your different sections one onto the other. And here you got their answered by oboes and clarinets. Like, okay, so yeah, this is gonna squawk. All right, with anybody lesser than a professional, and even for a professional, it's almost like a wasted note, right? Yeah. Maybe what if this note was played by bassoon? Right. Ta 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 ta, bassoon, right? And then answered by piccolo, ta 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 ba 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 bum. Yeah, and this is all great. Ta 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 ba da 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 dum. Yeah, I wouldn't score this for contrabassoon. No way, no how. Not even for contraforte. Just make it a bassoon part. Yeah, and then just have your contrabassoon come in here. This is all very cool down here. This little bits of support and so on. Ba-ba-ba-ba-bum. Yeah. And then okay. All right. All right. So this is, you really are. Yeah. I mean, it's very Mahlerian right in here, right? Which is, like if you're gonna be this wild, if you're gonna be this intense with your parts, then you just might as well just go modern with everything. And look, if this G is already being played in both the cellos and the violas, why does it need to be played by the second violins, right? Even this G here is being played by the violas, so why does it need to be played by the second violins? Yeah. What did Jesse do? Just strings, right? The push to mezzo forte, then piano subito, and the doodle, right? All right, so now we've got, once again, strings. We've got these kind of big interlocking sixths and so on, sevenths. I feel that this is not too hard to do on cello. Cellists correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure it's just, yeah. Yeah, and this is very cool. The all these little compensating notes right here in the middle under this very driving string unison, and then with the duet trumpets right in here. You probably only need one single trumpet here. If I were to want like a mixed sound here, like maybe like English horn, right? would be something good to match up against this. But two trumpets is fine. Here you got marking it down to mezzo forte and so on. I think that works. I don't think you need to do this forte and then fortissimo and so on. Yeah, there's no division first or second time. You're saying second time only for your trumpets to play at all. Okay, all right. I think you can have it both times. And then bomb, 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 bomb. Yeah, it's very, very cool. Bomb, bomb, bomb. Dun, dun, dun. Right. Toodleet, toodleet. And this is very similar to that other part, except, here you've got bass drum and cymbal and so on. Yeah. Yeah, and then, yeah, very, very cool what you've got happening here in the flute. And nice big stretch here. The spacing of your wind parts. Yeah, these little triplets here in your piccolo and first flute. Pluck, pluck, pluck. Right, and now, we're coming into this next section right in here. I mentioned, previous approach might be the only workable strategy, but you have all these different ideas right in here. So I'm just going to treat it just, with its own, take it according to its own merits, right? And not just constantly do the comparison game. Because if we look back at what happened at the B section previously, right? We had the oboe and contrabassoon in octaves here, and this thing happening in strings, and the toot and the alternating bassoons and so on. All right, so this is a bit different. Not totally, but a bit different. All right, so here we've got unison first flute and first violins. Da-da-da-da, bum bum, clarinets and bassoons working together, and with the middle strings. Ba-dum-bum. Yeah, so piccolo. You're putting a lot onto the piccolo here. So what are you doing here? What's this on the slurring? Just go, ta 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 ta. This isn't best practice. Okay, just slur by the beam group. It's like this is not helping the player, and it is not helping the music. All right, just slur by the beam group, and then, and then just make this all staccato. Ta 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 ta. Yeah, and don't do this slur up thing. You just go ta 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 ta. See, because like you're not doing slur up, slur up, slur up, slur up, slur down, slur up. You're not doing that in your piccolo part, so there's no need to sort of start the pattern here, right? There isn't a pattern. So just slur by the beam group and you're going to be fine. And it helps the player just keep things simple. If you're going to slur this, right? And so on. Yeah, and I really love the little, this stuff in here. You don't need to do this first trading off to second, trading off to first to second, and so on and so forth. I would, what I would do is, I would possibly have this all played by first and this all played by second up to here, right? And then you have the first coming back in and then the trading off, right? I think that works a whole lot better. Okay, and then just all the tremolo in here and so on. Yeah, your use of tremolo is also, like from Berlioz forward. I'm not saying that it wasn't used before, but it's just like the way that you use it is not the, it's not like the fourth movement of the Sixth Symphony, right? That kind of thing. You're just using it in a very textural way. Yeah, and then here this push right in here from Triple P. Da, 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 da. Yeah, and this is, look at this beautiful tutti that you wrote right in here, right? I think you could have even brought in more horns and more trumpets and alto trombone. Really made this beautiful and massive. But, other than that, I think this all works pretty well. Yeah, and then this just looks weird. First time up for second time lower. I would make this into separate voices, right? Okay. All right, so refresh, reboot. This time I will compare. Let's jump back to C. Here we had pizzicato, right? And then like a little wind aubade here, answered by strings. Right, and then the little da 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 and bassoons and brass and so on. All right, so remember how all this went, right? Okay, so now let's jump back down to this other part. So here we have winds. Yeah, I think this is all fine. It's all nice. Bassoons. Yeah. And then clarinet bow. I think that this could all be played by a single player. I don't think it needs to be divided into two parts. Yeah. And this is interesting, the cross-voicing of the oboe and the clarinet. I think it's very effective with the way you've got it here, especially doubling the viola. Right? Pizzicato, you mean to go back to arco here, right? That's another thing, is there's just a little teeny bit of sloppiness in your pizzicato arco proofreading. Yeah. And this push in here, that's really lovely. All the brass, a bit of bass drum in there, boom, boom, right? And then answering, I love these sixths in here. These can be played non-divisi, but you do need to mark it. All right. But here I would make this divisi because of the drop down. And once again, just da 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 da, right? Da 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 da. Just have the dovetailing right here on the second beat, right? And then same thing. Don't have your violas come in on this really high note. Just have them, start here, and then here. Da, 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 da. Now here, this is an octave thingy here, so whatever. Just like that. That's not really a seam. I mean, it is a seam, but it's not dovetailing, so not really. Yeah, and then once again, I mean, I just feel that this is a lot of elbow grease here. You know, especially like very very fast stuff happening. Of course, Beethoven would do this from time to time, but did he do it for this long in this type of context? You just have to ask yourself, how appropriate is that? Da 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 da. Just imagine if this were like horns and if this were chromatic horns and trombones, right, rather than trumpets. Bum, 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 bum. Or maybe like first trumpet taking the top line, and then the rest of it was horns and like trombones and so on. Yeah, and this is really lovely the way the winds come in over the top here, and meanwhile all the strings here. Plunk, plunk. You got to say non-divisi here. Plunk. Yeah, this is pretty easy. Yeah. Yep. Those are all E standard. Okay. Bump, bump, blump. What happened here with the strings? They don't get to play on the downbeat. Your first violins. Their absence will be noted. Maybe you're thinking, well, okay, like that gives them time to get ready for this. They don't need the time. This is a single note. That would be easy to go back into that. All right, and what are you doing to me, Jesse? Okay, so plum, 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 and you have this big at the end. In this case, the way that you've got the articulation at the end and everything else. So in this case, you wouldn't want the double dotted half note, double dotted half note. So that's totally fine the way that you've got it scored. But you could have this could be a dotted half note tied to the eighth, right? Rather than the way that you've scored it here. Yeah, just like you have here, right? So the dotted half note preceding the final beat. Yeah, so and then here you've got like a suspended cymbal, right? So that's not a Beethoven period, right? So if that's not Beethoven period, then why do your horns need to be Beethoven or your trumpets need to be period Beethoven, right? There might be a lot of economizing that you can do once you free yourself from the affect, which I'm I am one who embraced that affect as well. I'm not saying that it's good or bad, but from the affect of period instruments, right? And you'll be able to bring in horns in more advantageous ways, which I'm sure Beethoven would have loved to do. And just natural trumpets, you can leave all that trumpet stuff in that you had before. You might not even need, as I said before, you might not even need your trombones at all. You might not even need your bass trombone. Who knows? Maybe. All right. So what a wonderful hour and a quarter or whatever that I have spent with you on this, Jesse. It's just so lovely. I have so much appreciated your support and friendship over the years, and your efforts. I feel that it's like that one of the wonderful things about the orchestration challenge is that when people are working on them and submitting them to the challenge and so on, they're not just working for themselves, but they're working for the community in a way, right? Because all the different orchestrators look at each other's works and they compare and contrast, and it's not a game of like who did better or who did worse. It's just more like, wow, did you see what that guy did there? What did you see with that person? How that person dealt with that particular idea. And I am constantly learning from, like thinking about, had I seen all of these entries first, I think that there are a lot of things I would have done differently in my own interpretation. Just because I am the guy doing all the evaluations here doesn't mean that I am superior in every way to everybody else's idea, right? That's not it at all. And I'm sure there are things, there are things that I look back in my own interpretation and think, oh man, I could really improve this, make it more period to Beethoven, or just unmoor myself from that and just make it feel right, with more possibilities on more modern instruments, right? So really a wonderful score, Jesse. Like this, the thing that I really hate, the thing I hate to imagine is that my feedback would be taken as a criticism, and it isn't. It never is, right? It is always, what can we learn from what has been submitted here? How can I help my participants improve their orchestration the way that I see it? And I'm not the last word by any means. There are probably going to be comments below that can help improve things that I didn't think of or didn't have. I didn't maybe felt I didn't want to open that can of worms, maybe. So really, really lovely. Thank you so much. Thanks everybody out there watching this. Please give Jesse your best in the comments below. This is going to be followed by a screen of my suggestions for Jesse to to check out, to possibly use if he feels like he needs to prepare this score. Who knows? Wouldn't it be great if there were suddenly all these scores out there floating around of the orchestration of this? That would be wonderful, because it is really, the symphonic possibilities are enormous in this work. And maybe people have been scoring like the Appassionata because it's it's much more well known, and it's and it's in the easier key, right? And maybe just the key has been stopping people. But scoring it in G and F, and I've even seen it in E flat, right, or in G flat when Charles adapted it for brass band. So so there are possibilities in the source work, and I feel that you explored those brilliantly, Jesse. So great work. I'll see everybody in a couple of days for our next really great score here in these longa level entries. Thanks so much. See you soon.